Hello, sir.
Good day to you.
How are you?
Just peachy keen. Every day is just a chance to make it through the day.
Well, I feel so bad because I was away last week speaking, and now I'm away this week trying to catch up on stuff. So you've been like single dad, three dogs, 280
Yeah.
girls for.
Oh my God. Dogs. What were we thinking? Actually, yeah, everything's been good. Everything's been going well. It's just a lot of everything. There's been a lot going on. But um yeah, I mean we're in play downs now, so the kids are busy every night and it'll be fine. It'll be good. It'll be fine. Be super fun.
I feel bad, but thank
That's all
you.
good. Don't worry about that.
Well,
How
I
about you?
have a guest today.
Yeah? You just rack them up, hey?
I do. You gotta pull your.
Well,
No, it's all good.
that didn't that didn't last long. You're doing so much, but you got to pull your weight. All right, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm just kidding. I
I
don't
know.
mind
No, I know.
reminding people.
Who's visiting us today?
We have Anna Levy-Warren. She's the founder and chief executive officer of Organizational Tutors. She's got over 20 years of experience in the field of psychology. She has her PhD in clinical psychology, and she's a leader in the field addressing executive functioning challenges in children and teens. And so we're going to be talking about executive functions today. Which I got to say, it's not just ADHD. I think people hear executive functions and they just assume it's ADHD, but truly, executive functioning is not only related to ADHD. So many of our kids have challenges, and I would actually say all teenagers are deficited in their executive functions. So, especially our teenagers, we need to help support and have some patience. That was just kind of a sidebar, but I will also just say Anna does speak regularly to parents and teachers at schools and education-based organizations throughout the US. She addresses a wide range of topics related to how we strengthen executive functioning at home and in the classroom, and just raising an organized child and empowering them to develop the skills to excel in all aspects of their lives. So I'm really excited to chat with her and jump in.
Sounds good.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Why don't we start off by having you introduce yourself to everyone?
My name is Anna Levy-Warren. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have been working with kids with complicated neuropsychological profiles and emotional obstacles to learning for about 20 years. And then I was blessed to have three of my own children, and two of them have brought me to my knees by having these complicated profiles. So I have both been in the space of expert and then the feeling of needing experts in all the different ways. So I'd say those are the most significant things in terms of this conversation.
I think that's huge. When I do all of my talks too, I'm always talking about I understand the parent perspective and putting theory into practice, what's feasible and real to do in everyday sort of life, the busyness of life. So,
Yeah.
which can be tricky. And Andy, I think, is a expert at managing three executive functioning deficited profiles in our house.
Yeah.
Myself,
I don't know if it's
myself
expert,
included.
but I've definitely got experience, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start off with talking about executive functioning? Maybe just breaking that down for parents who are listening, just what it encompasses and maybe some real life examples of what that looks like for navigating daily life.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that's so funny about the term is that it's, especially if you look it up in the research or in books, that really what people focus on is sort of the manifestations of the problem. And what I love to think about it is at a brain level, sort of what's going on. So I think about working memory, cognitive flexibility, and self-control as sort of the core brain level concepts, because I think it allows us to be more flexible in how we understand executive functions. So for me, working memory, I like to think about it as if you're a server at a restaurant and someone's going around with the little notes, like we're post-it notes in our brain, right? And how we take in information, not short-term memory, not long-term memory. But when there's a person who goes around the room and they don't have their notepad and they ask you what you want to eat, and you say, I'm gluten-free and dairy-free, and please hold the salt. And you look at them thinking, why aren't they writing this down? There's no chance they're going to remember this. And they do it for all 6 people at the table, and they feel confident and you're scared, but they come back and everything is perfect. And you watch working memory, right? It goes into their brain. They put it on the internal post-it notes. They spit it back out to the kitchen and all works well. And then you watch someone go around the table shaking with their hand on the pad and you say, I'd like a Diet Coke. And they say, Pepsi? And you say, no, Coke. And it goes back and forth like that. And you know the whole thing is going to go south. And you watch the post-it notes that don't get posted in the brain. And so I think about that in terms of how we work and don't work in terms of our working memory. And I don't know if that rings a bell for you too, but that's something that I like to think about for how it works in the real world.
That's a great analogy. I actually worked as a waitress and I lasted 2 shifts. And that was it because my working memory,
Yes.
and that's it. Like I just couldn't, and then the self-doubt and imposter syndrome and confidence, like they just
Exactly
will start to take over, right? Because you think that I'm stupid and, all of those secondary things that sort of roll out of that.
Yeah, and I love that. And that's something I love to talk about is the way our relationship to ourselves, our academic selves, how we consider who we are in relation to having these challenges. But I also think with working memory in school, how much kids are just asked to hold in their minds and where they're asked to take notes and put it down and the complexities of that. And you just see all the challenges with things like multiple step directions, right? My favorite cry out from a parent is get ready for school. And you're like, do you know how many steps go into get ready for school? And what are we doing when we're saying that to a kid who has working memory challenges? But to get back to the question, right? So working memory, and then there's cognitive flexibility, right? The capacity to think flexibly, think about different perspectives, kind of keep out of rigidity. And then self-control, which I think many people have talked about, but the sort of regulatory capacities and how you both keep yourself, in emotionally in check, but also I think the way that we really attention is a part of all of this because what we're choosing to pay attention to versus not attending to. Actually, and people very much talk about attention with executive functions, and I love to think about how much we are not paying attention to in order to attend to things in terms of the empathic standpoint. But all of these manifest, right, and like are the things we talk about most, the disorganization, planning, time management. But when I think about them as the working memory, self-control, and cognitive flexibility, it allows me to be more nuanced in how I understand the kids that are in front of me because I can see that it may not always concretize in the way that we expect it to.
And I think that then can get really frustrating for family, especially as they get older and there's all these expectations and why can't you do this? And your little sister can do it. Why can't you do it? And I find that their brain sort of sabotages them the more they try. Well, I think, I'm a great example. Andrew can attest to this, but, he'll say, Kay, let me know when you're ready, because I've got something important to tell you. So he's really good giving me that warning, right? I'm an adult, but so think of kids. So, okay, so I'm ready. And then I'm looking and he knows when I open my eyes wide and I lean forward, he's like, never mind, I will just text you because I'm trying. And the more I try, he's, how do you say it? Like you can just see the blinds closing in my eyes.
Yeah, I can just see you boarding the spaceship to another planet. Like it's literally like you walk through a door and you leave. And I'm like, okay, well, there's no point.
I also am partnered. My co-parent has very strong executive functioning challenges and rampant ADHD. And so we talk a lot about how we communicate things and what it means to use time or not, and how we get through sort of the organizational steps of life in a supportive way versus I like the blinds closing. I'm definitely going to use that in the future.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Even though I'm trying,
Yeah.
It is truly though, if you were to visualize it, it is like you're standing there and I can see you through the Venetians and you're just turning it and slowly it goes and I can't see you anymore. And it's almost like you're doing it, but I know you're not. But it's for us though, it's important. Like you talk about how to deal with it. Like we always joke around because the evenings are typically the craziest because everybody's kind of used up their control, their ability to control. So we kind of just roll with it. Like everybody is able to kind of have a good laugh about it, thankfully. So it isn't, from our perspective, it's not really burdensome, which is kind of, I think, important, right? Because there are times that we can get frustrated with each other, but we all kind of just see the maybe the humor or the silliness in it at times and just kind of accept it and move on.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. I mean, I think that's one of the most challenging things as parenting anyone who has executive functioning challenges, especially if you have them too. It's just that there can be a way in which life's expectations become so frustrating, and just walking through each step is so exhausting and you're so depleted, right? And as cognitive load increases and there's ego depletion and everyone is so emotionally exhausted, you see all of these sort of, the dysregulation come forward, and it's so hard to keep your own sort of temperature down. One of the things that I actually love when I talk to my kids directly about their challenges and also talk to parents is I talk a lot about developmental age versus chronological age, and how we consider sort of instead of going by developmental milestones that we assume to go with chronological age, that we start to think almost from an internal family systems perspective, like different pieces of ourselves, parts of ourselves, how we know that we have younger parts within us. But it's like, yeah, and cognitively, for someone with ADHD, if there's a 3-year developmental lag, and you're saying, go get your stuff ready for soccer, and they're 10, that you should be thinking, what would I actually do for my 7-year-old? And that really helps me stay out of my frustration. That I'm not saying like that repeat is like, it's like, you're 15, like, why can't you get this done? It's like, I have to think, actually, my severely ADHD daughter is not 15 when it comes to getting out of the house. Like, she's actually much younger and out of pandemic, and she's even younger. So the way that I would scaffold her is of a different age. And that really helps me stay out of my upset. And so that I don't bang up against, why are you not behaving the way I expect a kid of your age to behave? And instead I'm thinking, right, this is a part of you that's a lagging skill, right? It's underdeveloped in this way. And to help you, I so want to lean into your growth edge of like the space that's next, that place where you're going to feel successful, and not constantly be saying, why are you not keeping up with a kid your age? And if I speak in that language, I find that I can be more patient and sort of settle into myself and not think about it in that kind of frustrating bang your head against a wall way.
I think that reframe is so important, because if we see a kid who's being lazy and manipulative and unmotivated and would do anything for screens but doesn't care about it, we're going to respond very differently than if we think of a kid who, yeah, that executive functioning isn't caught up to where their age is and that they're trying. I love sharing the example of the Emoji Movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that. For listeners who haven't seen Emoji, the main character is Meh, like MEH, meh. And he wants, everybody in his family was meh, and it's his turn to be meh. And he wants so badly to do it. He knows what he needs to do. It's not that he doesn't know, and he has the skills to do it, but just in the time that comes where he's supposed to be meh, he just can't do it. And that's a big problem with executive functions. They usually have the skills and know what they need to do. They just can't do it in the heat of the moment. And so if we just reframe and have a little bit more compassion for them, I think that does make a big difference. So then what's next? Like, if parents can reframe and know that their kids aren't doing this on purpose to overwhelm and frustrate them, that they're truly trying, how else would you say that they could help, support their kiddo?
Yeah, I mean, I think the scaffolding is so important. It's like, once we understand what these challenges are, right? If we go back to the working memory example, right, that there's a way in which multi-step directions aren't being put on the Post-it notes. And maybe instead of actually being 15, that they might be 11 or 12 internally. I like to think it's like, well, what do we do with an 11, 12-year-old who can't follow multi-step directions? Instead of being frustrated every day as, how could you not get yourself out of the house and get your soccer stuff and be ready? It's like, okay, well, as parents, what do we want to do? And I like to think collaboratively with a kid. It's like, let's make it, the kind of concrete tool of, let's make a checklist. Let's first of all understand your brain. Like, actually, it's not there's something wrong with you. It's just that your brain doesn't have a Post-it note system in the same way. So what we're going to do, you have many other creative, wonderful things that you can do, but let's actually take your creativity and make, a Post-it note board so you can actually see it. and put the different things that get ready for soccer mean. And then what feels good to you when you successfully do that? And then what kind of reminders do you want? And so when you get the feedback from a kid, when you say it to me over and over again, like, I can't hear you, or you just start to listen to that and to lean into kind of the collaborative process of working with them to come up with a system that will work. And a lot of parents will say to me, you got to be kidding me. Like, I'm going to sit down and make that poster board. Like, with what time? And like, I really understand, but the time we waste going to bring soccer equipment to a kid who forgot their soccer equipment, if you count up those minutes, they probably will work out well in the end to do this other thing. So I really try to work with parents and families to think about the ways that we can really customize tools to be specific to kids and work in a family system to address the underlying challenge, and to change the feeling for the student or for their child around what this actually means. It's like, this is just a way, we all have different strengths and challenges. This is a beautiful way in which your brain works differently, but the way that we're going to address it is to think about what we can do, what tool we can use, and how you can help me, instead of having it be the parent telling. It's like, what's the tool we're using?
Yeah. Which is so important. The best strategies are the ones that kids come up with themselves, always.
Always. Yeah.
So we just need to be really good question askers, like asking open-ended questions to get them thinking about some of those things. Andy, did you have anything you wanted to, did you have any questions? Because otherwise I can take over.
No, I mean, I'll say something and then you can take over. It's funny because I was just thinking about how you were talking about reframing it, because Willow and I had a bit of an exercise like that yesterday. So she had to do a rewrite on a test and she needed help studying. And studying is always an interesting challenge for us with her. It was with Maya too. But it was your comment about having it be their idea, like having them come up with it and then just be the question asker, is essentially where we landed on it in trying to get some progress, because there was a lot of helplessness at the beginning, and I was finding that I was getting frustrated. I'm like, dude, you asked me for this help and I'm trying to help you. So let's do that. And it wasn't until I said, okay, you tell me how you want this to go, and then we'll just go that way. And she did. And it was pretty much exactly what I was trying to get her to do. But once we reframed it and she had the idea that she was going to drive the boat or drive the bus, I just had to kind of fulfill my role of, okay, she's ready. Do you want me to ask you a question? Great. And then she would move to the next topic. And we made up a ton of ground until I, similar to you closing the blinds, I could see her just running out of steam because she started to ask me and would just wait, but she wasn't trying to answer the question. So I finally had to go, okay, we're done. Like, it's time for you to go to bed, right? We'll see you later. But again, it was just kind of recognizing that and trying to readjust on the fly, which, I'll be fair, I'm not great at all the time, but it actually worked out yesterday. So that was good.
Did you try the stimulus input trick? The metronome, what is it called?
Metronome?
Metronome? Yeah.
No, we didn't. I asked how she wanted to do it, and she wasn't up for the gimmicks. She was all business last night. And so, yeah, we didn't do that. I don't know how she did on the test either. So it could have completely been a failure. And in which case, this is a moot point.
The metronome.
I mean, I think so.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll just explain that. Just research shows if you have a stimulus in the environment while you're studying, so it could be a metronome, it could be a smell, whatever, and then have the same stimulus through the night when you're sleeping, because that's when we consolidate what we've learned and process things. It's supposed to help you. I don't know. So we're going to test it out. Sorry to interrupt. What were you going to say?
No. I was just going to say that I think one of the things that's really interesting, at least in my experience I'm in New York City in the school system, is that there's really this expectation that kids sort of magically learn format specific test taking strategies and really understand the way in which they break down material into its component parts and take it into their brains. And it's sort of amazing to me that the kids with strong executive functions might do that naturally, but so many kids don't. And trying to help them understand that just reading material over and over again isn't the effective way of getting it into their brain, and sort of the way in which you have to retrieve it is also really crucial. So, and I find that having, again, it's that collaborative process of figuring out with them, how is this going to feel if it's a multiple choice test and we practice doing the multiple choice now, is that working or not working? And, what do you think will be an effective way of doing this, is so much easier to manage than the sort of telling, which I find really, really backfires most of the time.
Yeah, for sure. Any suggestions specifically for impulsivity? Because I find that's the biggest crux. When they're impulsive, they've already responded or not responded or paid attention or not. And so there's no opportunity to use any other executive functions. So,
Yeah, yeah, I love that question. And that's such a nice way of putting it. I think impulsivity, honestly, it's so much about also the person on the other side of the impulsivity, right? It's like as a parent, like sitting with someone's impulsivity. And actually, I find that the modeling of those sort of pausing and breathing and being able to sort of sit back and reflect that kind of experience of, wow, that happened really quickly. I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to take a minute, and then to reflect back and have that kind of go back and forth in a reflective functioning way, almost like that mirroring experience, I find really helpful. I do a lot of the modeling of my own slowdown to try to have the quote unquote teaching of how to not be as impulsive. And I really try to work on waiting and pausing really intentionally. Interestingly, and I know this is not the question you're asking, but I find the impulsivity around screens and just getting and responding to things is such a huge problem and has such a negative impact that I work a lot with teenagers on using, like send later so that they can reread it. So they have the experience and feeling of like, sending the text message that they want, typing really quickly, and then not doing it. Or practicing sending an email to a friend or to a parent first. So it gets like kind of accepting the impulsivity and finding ways to utilize it to then sort of look at it later, reflect on it, and change it. So you get the feeling of impulsive without the outcome of the impulsive action. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. On screens, how does that affect executive functions? It always comes back to screens. I wish we could just,
Doesn't it?
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, why is there so much more reported ADHD? And I don't know if you have an answer for it there, but that I find one of the things that's so challenging is like, of course, there's just the cognitive load has increased so significantly in the way that we interact in the daily world with technology. And that there's also, and our ego depletion is so much. I realize that that's not always a term other people use. So my favorite example of ego depletion is sort of the experience in our brains when we watch a sad movie and we feel really sad, and that we don't sometimes realize that will impact studying, right? So it's like, I'm just going to watch a show. And it's like, did you get worked up by the show that still has a toll that it takes? And so, when I think about the way screens have impacted executive functions, is like they're just more challenged all the time, right? Where there's something, when you have a phone, there's something putting your hands up in your face and trying to get your attention all the time. So you're needing stronger executive functions to manage that. Our load is more. We're more tired, and then forget if you're like stressed and hungry and dysregulated because you have a regulatory challenge, right? So all of these things come back together and exhaust our systems and really max out our executive functions, which are required for so many of the ways that we learn and show up in the world and manage relationships, see ourselves. So I think a lot of the work I've done with parents and teens around screens is like, what is the relationship you have with your device? How do you learn to check your own screen time? How do you use lock boxes? And helping teenagers in particular have their own contracts with themselves. Because unfortunately, when you get into I'm a strong believer that parents should be more involved and go ahead and take phones and like shut down the internet and do all the things necessary when kids are younger. But then we also have to teach, and we also really have to teach people how to do it for themselves. Because otherwise we become adults and go, or even try to get to college and can't make it through before adulthood. So I think it's the dual strategy of understanding that when they're young, that we need to help by removing screens as much as we can. And that's a part of our job, and also helping kids and then teenagers learn to manage the screens for themselves.
Yeah. And creating habits. I mean, we just always set these rules, very black and white rules that now they just follow, right? No phones in the bedroom. They're just always out of the bedroom. And at night, they're all plugged in at one space together. Andrew and I have just gone to grayscale on our phones, which is fantastic.
Wow, that's so great.
So
grayscale. It's good until you do an Instacart order and you realize how much you relied on colors to choose the food you're getting. It was
Or
an
taking
So
interesting
funny.
delivery. Yeah.
pictures is kind of a
Yeah,
pain
totally.
too. It's all black and but yeah, those kinds of things I think can be helpful. And just to answer the question about, 10 years ago, I would have always said it was correlational. We know our executive functioning challenge or differences, I should say, the neurodivergent, the differences, they're just more attracted to that, right? Because the dopamine isn't working properly. That's our motivation reward system in the brain. And so, screens were very stimulating, but we actually do have research now showing that screens do impair executive functions. And so a lot of brains, so to the point that we can actually say causation, it is causing ADHD because the brain, that prefrontal cortex that houses the executive functions, are completely different from previous generations, right? So kiddos who have had a lot of screen time from a young age, that part of the brain doesn't have the same connections as other children. And so we are seeing all of the ADHD symptoms directly a cause from excessive screen time, unfortunately. So, but I think it's all of the other pieces. I mean, just knowing our phone can be off, but even if it's in our backpack, turned off, our brain will still be on that cell phone. And so it's going to interfere with studying, with focusing, with engaging. And so it's really getting it somewhere else where they know it's not accessible, for their brain to actually be completely disengaged from it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just was I was giving a parent talk, and a parent said to me, what do I do? My kid keeps taking his iPad. And I was like, well, where was the iPad? And they said it was just on the kitchen counter. And I was like, well, that to me, that's not doing our parenting job. It's like that thing is screaming, touch me. And so, how do we help by putting it away? And then how do we help kids understand some of the brain connections you were just making of that's actually going to be hard. So you need to understand that if it's not away, your brain's it's going to be calling to you, and it's going to be so hard not to listen to its call.
Right. Yeah. I think the one big last one that jumps out that sort of takes over everything else is just the emotion regulation piece. Do you have any, big recommendations for families just to help their kiddos with emotion regulation?
It's such a funny thing. The name it to tame it, right? The idea of just that basic statement. I always go back to it because it's so powerful and simple. And that when it comes to identifying feelings, and I think actually, so many adults don't know how to use feelings language. It's like, I feel pissed off at you. I feel that you are not being smart. It's like, those are not feelings. Those are pseudo feelings, right? What are we really saying? And the feelings are so simple, and they're usually one word. And the idea that we be able to sort of express the feeling, to me, is, and that there's room to express the feeling, and that there's multiple truths, and we can sit with that in such a real way, is, I find, very regulating and keeps kids able to express feelings without having sort of the intensity of the dysregulation with it so much. Um, and then the other piece of it that I could speak more about that, but one of my favorite stories is actually my daughter taught me, when she was really young, that she was having horrible outbursts. And I found that after the outburst, that there would be sort of a period of me really needing her to own what happened in the outburst, that I really just wanted some responsibility to happen. And so that would be where the escalation actually kept going after she was sort of done having a feelings outburst. And she said to me, Mommy, can I just have a restart? And I stared at her and I thought, what are you talking about? For a long time. And then I realized it was such a simple ask, and she was done and I wasn't done. And that I really needed to understand that for her regulatory system, and for when things went online that way, that when she was done, she knew that it hadn't gone well. She didn't need me to reinforce and tell her all about it, that she was able to actually talk about her feelings, and that activated state, which is, I think, part of that same sort of emotion dysregulation, was something that we could work on prevention, and we could work on naming a feeling, and we could then let it go and restart and talk about how to repair or make reparations for things that had happened without kind of re-engaging and escalating from there. So I know that's not exactly answering your question, but I think that the framework around it for family is, feels just, it takes the intensity out of the systemic experience a little bit, and it makes it easier to say, yeah, it was a moment of dysregulation. Like a yes, the more that we learn to name our feelings, the easier it will be. The more we learn to breathe, the easier it will be. Here are things that we can do to try to identify our experience and down regulate. And here are ways that our system can stay calm in the face of that.
Right. Yeah. In the heat of the moment, I mean, they're just not able to think rationally. And if
Right.
there does need to be, talking just escalates. You said it, talking just escalates. But if there does need to be further discussion, it's just at a different time, right? So I think that's helpful for parents to know, because they're like, they can't get away with whatever X, Y, and Z, but you can have that discussion after. Well, there's lots, we've talked about a lot here. Any last minute, anything that you think's important for parents to know that we haven't talked about?
I guess the only thing that I find is, and we didn't talk a lot about tools and strategies and the sort of concrete things that we can do. My favorite one is still the calendar and the family calendar, because it's a way of reflecting and really knowing what's happened and hasn't happened. And I find it sort of such a beautiful way to strengthen executive functions at a systemic and individual level. But I guess the piece that I like to add is that I find that all of these tools, that there's also a relationship to the tool, and a way in which, when you're thinking about how kids feel good about themselves, that you want to have a positive relationship with something like a calendar. And I think that's a way that people don't always think about it. But to me, when you have a calendar that has colors you like, and it's got the font type that was meaningful to you, and it's chunked in a way that looks good and feels good, that you have a relationship with the map and compass of your day that is actually extremely helpful and important. And that if people are looking at their calendar and feeling anxious or overwhelmed, as an example of any tool, that then makes the tool useless. And so I think, as we're parents, when we're looking at all these skills and strategies and tools and things we do to strengthen EF, that it's also just really important to think about the way that we feel about the tool and how to make it something that feels good and strengthening and aligns with the experience that a kid wants to have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Did you have other concrete tools that we should discuss?
Oh, I mean, I love, I'm a concrete tool. Like my favorite thing to do is look at a neuropsych report and look at the recommendations and find concrete tools to creatively utilize with kids. So I love to think about not just even in this technological space, but with assistive technology now, our phones can do so many amazing things, although I'm sure you have people who've spoken about those. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something as silly, and I wonder, do you use time timers in your house? And everyone talks about them, I'm sure, but
we don't, but no.
I don't know how you feel about them, but to me, with kids who are time blind, I just love the actual visualization, and people talk about it all the time as like what it looks like. But I think about it in terms of like, is there songs that you want to play during that time? Are there other ways that it's not just the time, but something you want to pair positively with the time, and to speak time language at developmentally appropriate levels. Like, is it as long as your favorite show? Is it what is the thing that you do that you link to time that we can customize so you understand how long this is and it's internalized? So that's an example of a way that I like to think about tools. And I think I could spend, honestly, I always joke, I could spend 15 hours talking about the different ways to use a calendar. So, but I think it's a magical instrument, and that one of the things that we don't use it as much for, that I mentioned briefly, is just the reflective piece, where it's like when you get to sit as a family and say what went well and what didn't go well over the course of this week, and how do we learn from that? How long did that take? Were we late? Do we want to add travel time? Do we want to take it away? And it sounds silly, but I have really watched, even in my own family, that people, that the family, everyone wants to contribute to that, right? It's a way of like active learning and engagement, and then we can change what we do. How did we, did we leave things behind? How do we add, we had a calendar alert and we had a Post-it note. Those didn't work. What are the other things we could do? We could add, a voice on the phone that also tells you who's your favorite person and who you want. Do you want your dad yelling at you in a joking tone? So just really integrating the I think the emotional component to the tool is the thing that, like, that pairing those two things together is the thing that I find most exciting.
Yeah, which is important. Well, lots to think about. And I think we'll have to have a second episode to go through some more of those concrete tools, because I think that's really what parents need, is some of those practical pieces and how we kind of put this into practice. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to dive into more concrete tools.
Yeah, we are as well. Take care.
Okay, bye.